Just a fan who wants nothing less than effectively wild. Oh, why, oh, wild. Oh, wild. Nothing less than effectively wild.
Hello and welcome to episode 2381 of Effectively Wild, a baseball podcast from FanGraphs presented by our Patreon supporters. I am Ben Lindbergh of The Ringer, joined by Meg Rowley of FanGraphs. Hello, Meg.
Hello.
I didn't ask how you were, but people are about to hear
I'm
how
croaky. I sound like I'm going as Kathleen Turner for Halloween, and I'm working on the impression. I sound like Betty Davis if she had smoked a pack of cigarettes the day before. I feel mostly okay. I perhaps have some fatigue, but it's mostly just everyone else problem. At least everyone else just listens to me talk. So my apologies for being pretty croaky, you know?
Well, we'll make it work. And if you need me to monologue while you recover your voice, just let me know. And I guess we should say, we said this on our Patreon bonus episode, which was published over the weekend, but it's playoff season, which means it is also playoff live stream season.
Yes.
For some of our Patreon supporters, those at the appropriate tiers. So just a PSA, because every now and then we remind people that they can support the podcast on Patreon, and some of them do, which is very gratifying. So you can do that, and if you do that at that level, then one of the perks you get this month is that you have to, no, it's optional, but you get to, if you so choose, join us in the Patreon Discord group while we banter during a couple of games TBD. As soon as we know which games we will be doing, generally we pick one about a week or so in advance based on which matchups intrigue us and our schedules and whether or not we sound like Betty Davis after she just smoked a pack of cigarettes. So we will notify our Patreon people via the Patreon messaging system, and we will notify you if you are one of said people. So please do join, and we just chat. We just chat and bring some friends on and talk while the game's going on, and people can chat via text in the Patreon Discord group while we do that. So we'll do a couple at some point before the playoffs end. We always do, and you even teased that if the Mariners made the World Series, you might do a live stream during a Mariners road World Series game. So we'll see. That's something to root for people.
I hopefully will sound better by then. I do love our crack strategy of every now and again remembering to ask people to support the podcast. Oh, yeah. We have generous listeners who like our show and want to hang out. I think the live streams are super fun. They typically feature at least one person who is on their way to being or is already unhinged. Often it's Craig being stressed about the Dodgers, although not always, sometimes. He's very level-headed. Joe Kelly not being there will probably make him more hinged regardless of what's happening in the game. But I think they're a good fun time. They're a nice way to pass a couple of hours. Sometimes we get absolutely wild marathon games. Sometimes I try to surreptitiously crunchy snacks and mute myself appropriately. But come hang out. Hopefully I'll have a voice by then.
Yes. So we're going to talk about how the regular season wrapped up. We're going to talk a little bit about the playoffs. Here's a fun with press releases edition. We just got this press release before we started recording from Major League Baseball. MLB attendance reaches 71.4 million and growth continues throughout the sport. And that's the headline. MLB attendance reaches 71.4 million, 3 straight years of growth for first time since 2007. It does not in any place specify how large the growth was or how much the increase was. And I knew it wasn't big, so I just went to check. And to be clear, there's nothing inaccurate in this press release.
Sure.
No lies detected, but I did think it was kind of funny that they're bragging about the 71.4 million because last year's attendance was 71.3 million. And that, if anything, that implies like 100,000 difference there, that overstates the case, because last year's attendance was 71,348,405, and this year's attendance was 71,409,421. So it was basically, a third of the way to 71.4, maybe a bit more, and now it's just over 71.4. It's a difference of like 61,000 or something like that.
Well,
not a lot.
Very much at all, yeah.
And not only is it not very much, but most of the reason why there is that increase is that there was one more game played. I think that. So last year, I guess a game was canceled and not made up. So there were 2,429. This year, there were 2,430. So I don't know which game it was that wasn't made up last year or what the expected attendance would have been. But that's, just a little bit more than one good game's worth of attendance, basically.
That's funny.
Yeah, if you break it down by the difference in average attendance per game.
Yeah.
Last year, it was 29,373. This year, it was 29,386. So that is an increase of, on average, 13 fans per game. 13. So it's as if they sent a press release to brag, like, we got 13 more fans to come per game this year.
You got a church van worth of new attendance per game.
13. No, look, it counts. I mean,
sure.
It's an increase. It's not a decrease. Challenging economic environment and all sorts of other competing entertainment options, and two teams playing in minor league parks, which the press release does not mention. They don't brag in here about, we managed to have an increase even though somehow we have two teams in minor league parks. They did not specify that. But knowing that context, it maybe makes it a tad more impressive. But it is a little funny that they're kind of bragging about 3 straight years of growth and 71.4 million without specifying that it's really 13 more fans per game. There's some additional info in the email that it does actually sound encouraging. Things about TV ratings being up and streaming and social media stuff and average age of ticket buyers and viewers being down. So that's all good. But the headline is essentially, we drew 13 more fans per game on average this year. Go us.
I'm of the opinion, I sound so bad. Wow. I even tried really hard just not to talk for most of the morning.
Yeah, that's my strategy most days. But.
I had a little, I can't. That's not an achievable strategy for me most of the time. Look, some of us live our lives out loud. I'm a talker, Ben. Professional talker over here.
Well, that's the thing. I'm a professional talker, but I'm not really an amateur talker.
Right.
I'm only talking if somebody's paying me to do it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if someone put a microphone in front of me, otherwise I'm happy to stay silent most of the time.
Yeah. When I was a little kid, if I would drive places with my dad, like if we would drive from, sometimes we would drive from like Seattle to Bremerton, which is on the other side of the Puget Sound, to go visit my grandparents. Because sometimes you got to drive around rather than take the ferry. The ferry schedule doesn't work out, or you miss it. You got to drive around. So my dad would be like, I need 10 minutes of uninterrupted silence. And I would wait very patiently. And then I would immediately start talking again. For all the things I thought in those 10 minutes, Dad. This is what I was thinking about while I had to be quiet. Anyway, who were we talking about? Oh, right. Major League Baseball.
13 fans.
Attendance, 13 fans. I always struggle in the post-pandemic era to know what is good as far as attendance numbers go. I mean, I think the lack of retrenchment is inherently positive. And my understanding is that if you compare where we're at attendance-wise now, we've largely made up the pandemic swoon, right? Like the numbers are strong, both in terms of gate. And, there's always a bit of squishiness with tickets because it's like announced attendance, and that can mean a couple of different things depending on what the team goes by. And it doesn't necessarily mean like butts in seats, right?
Yeah. The official average attendance per game eclipsed 2019's in 2023. So the new rules helped.
The new rules helped, but like the fact that we recovered both from the pandemic and then from the effects of the lockout, which tend to, I think, sour people on the enterprise. I think the fact that we've seen those gains and that people are watching on TV and all of that is very positive. You want the sport to be healthy. I'm less fussed about like cultural prominence, but I'm not fussed about it, right? Like I want baseball to be in the conversation. And I think that, you know, we have such great players right now, and that is certainly helping. The new rules have helped. So I think that it all feels very positive, but there is a small part of me that is like, well, if it was like really positive, would you be crowing about 13 extra people? It's also funny because, you know, in years like this, i.e. non-bargaining years, the league has a ton of incentive to talk about the health of the sport, the profitability of the sport, all of the, you know, the eyes that are on the sport. And then there can be kind of like tonal shifts around that stuff when you get into bargaining years and you have to paint a picture of the sport as one that requires concession in order to maintain. So it's just an interesting kind of push and pull and back and forth on that. But I mean, generally, look, I think particularly in a year that we have talked a lot about being like pretty mid, at least on the team level, I think that's very positive. And it does make you feel good about sort of the long-term viability of baseball because in addition to the in-person attendance, I know they track, you know, viewership. And my sense is that that's all pretty positive, even for teams that aren't necessarily all that good. And, you know, I think the broadcast picture long-term is pretty cloudy. We've just seen Seattle shutting down Root Sports. So this is another team that's going to go to full MLB game production. Seattle being the division series bound Seattle Mariners.
Yes.
And so, you know, like that part, you feel like you might be able to weather that. Although obviously, like I should say, like there are a lot of people at Root who do good work who are about to not have jobs. So that part really sucks. But anyway, I just never, it's always a mixed bag. I think that you don't want the numbers going down. That would sound like I'm doing Jimmy Stewart.
I know. I was
as
going to
Kathleen
say,
Turner.
You're almost doing a natural Jimmy Stewart now without even, this might be your best Jimmy Stewart attempt ever. And it's not even on purpose.
It's not quite in the right register though. I mean, I feel like the affect is right, but I don't know if the rest of it. I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened. I was like, oh my God, am I getting the razor blade throat COVID thing? But I don't have COVID. I just have some dumb little cold, you know, being felt right before the wild card.
It's the end of the season. Everyone's playing a little hurt, playing a little tired. It's the grind. But you got to keep going because the games do, or at least many of them do. Not all of them do. I have no problem with the press release. I'm entertained by it. I'm happy that MLB's attendance is not down. And the 13 extra fans on average went home either very happy or very unhappy this past weekend.
Oh, my gosh.
Deeply engaged one way or another because the last weekend did not disappoint. Well, to be clear,
I mean,
it's very drastically disappointed some. But from an entertainment perspective, we got good stuff. The streak, the run continued of engaging games and memorable moments. And I guess there's no boring way to clinch a playoff spot in the last weekend or last game of the season. However you win, you'll take it and you'll be happy to have it. But there were just some really great ones. Just some, you know, whether it was guys getting knocked out, you know, Mike Trout more or less ending the Astros with a couple dingers on Saturday, and the Astros were supposed to have an easy schedule. A's and Angels, easy pickings, and then turned out not to be easy enough for them. And then the more affirmative, the positive case, I mean, you had things like Noel V. Marte, converted outfielder, robbing
an amazing catch.
Brian Reynolds, maybe saving the season. That was
the season.
Phenomenal, just fantastic moment.
Yeah.
You had Alejandro Kirk's grand slam on Sunday.
Yeah,
to
and then he had
clinch the
another
division
home
for
run in
Toronto
that
and
game.
another homer. Yeah. How awesome was that? There was Cedon Rafaela's rare walk-off triple. That was a fun moment. There was the playoff clinching walk-off hit by pitch for the Guardians by CJ Kayfus,
man.
a player I'm very familiar with. I assure you, I'm well apprised of CJ Kayfus's career and was before this moment, and how dare anyone suggest otherwise. But that was fun. And then you get Brian Rocchio's homer on Sunday. I guess that wasn't technically a division clinching homer because the Tigers lost that day anyway, but it was added emphasis, a 3-run shot. So just a lot of great moments that people got to enjoy, and that those guys can become heroes regardless of what happens from here on out. We actually got an email from listener Nick, who pointed out that Guardians first base coach Sandy Alomar Jr. appeared to have prevented a Merkles-Boner-esque error by the Guardians' Gabriel Arias, because he was on first base when Kayfus had the walk-off hit by pitch.
Yeah.
But he was like drawn toward the pileup because everyone was dogpiling and clustering around home plate.
Yeah.
And you could see him wandering. You know, he was drifting. He was drawn toward the center of gravity of all those celebrating bodies. And
Yeah.
Sandy Alomar Jr. just called out and said, no, don't. You have to, you got to go to second base. And he told him to keep
Yes.
going, and he intervened, and he may be prevented, I don't know, Gabriel's boner or whatever we would have called it. But it was sort of the same situation. And this was caught on a camera angle that had the full view of Arias on first, and Alomar calling out to him and intervening. Clutch moment by Sandy Alomar Jr. there. So I'm the guy who thinks there shouldn't be base
I was
coaches.
just about to say.
Yeah, and this doesn't necessarily change my mind. I mean, bad mistakes, they should cost you. But if you want an example of the contribution of base coaches currently, what
Yeah.
base coaches do, here it is, a division title saving decision and intervention by Sandy.
I have a hard time witnessing other people's embarrassment. It's really, really hard for me. It's a tricky emotional experience. And so the relief at being spared, watching him realize that he could have sealed it and then failing to do so.
Yeah.
I am so grateful for that. But yeah, it's you got to watch out, you know? Play's not done till it's done.
Got to keep your wits about you, no matter.
Got to keep your
how
wits
tempting
about
it is
you.
to join the dog pile. I get it. But yeah, wiser heads prevailed, more senior heads. So that was a nice little moment. It's just great endings. I mean, drama. And I feel so bad for mostly Mets fans, really, let's be honest.
Yeah.
Because Astros fans, look, that was a rough fall for them.
Yeah.
But they've had a good run. They haven't missed the playoffs since 2016. They barely missed the ALCS most of those years. And it felt like they were a little lucky to get to 87 wins or whatever it was.
Yes.
Like, I'm impressed that they got that close, frankly, because they just ran out of guys. And granted,
They ran out of guys, man.
Yeah, they allowed some of those guys to leave. They traded away some of those guys.
Sure.
But also other guys got hurt and they just could not fill fast enough. And then some signings didn't work out. And somehow they just still kept it going and were in it until in their case, bitter end. But, you know, that's got to be disappointing. But as collapses go, as declines go, I think as an Astros fan, you got to have a bit of a grace period for your team after the sustained stretch of success. And it's understandable. It's understandable why they faded. They were just so shorthanded. They ran out of steam. It wasn't as if they choked it away so much as they just ultimately didn't have the talent. So I don't know that you look at that team and say, yeah, that team should have made it. I don't know how that happened. It kind of feels appropriate that ultimately it didn't work out, even though it easily could have.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, they ended their season with the following members of the 40-man roster on the injured list: Jeremy Pena, Yordan Alvarez, Jake Myers, Spencer Arrighetti, Josh Hader, Bennett Sousa. Those are just the 40-man guys on the big league IL, you know? So I look, would I be telling the honest truth, my honest truth, if I said that I was sad that the Astros won't be playing October baseball? That would be a lie. I'd be telling a little fib. Is part of my feeling about that mostly related to Mariners fandom? Yeah. But I do think that, like, the playoff field benefits from there being different teams in it. There needs to be, I think it's good to have stalwarts, you know, because it suggests like a health to the league. It suggests franchises that have planned well, that have executed well, you know, signed good guys, drafted well and developed.
Continuity, some through lines.
Sure. And you want teams to be rewarded for having done a good job of roster construction, but you don't want it to be the exact same set of teams all the time. That's boring. It is boring even for neutrals. It's a real bummer for fans of clubs that never get to sort of go play in October. So I think that there is like a rejuvenation that happens. There are parts of the Astros roster that I think are going to be, that are good and players who can be good in the very near future. There are guys who I think are maybe, you know, they're on the back nine, as it were. They will be a fascinating team to watch in the offseason, sort of see how they understand themselves and their competitive window, because this isn't a great offseason for a team that really wants to push in and like go get some guys and then improve. It's sort of a weak free agent class, although as we learned over the weekend, one that will include Pete Alonso, you know, and there are guys who haven't made opt-out decisions. So we don't know its exact shape just yet, but one that isn't full of big stars. And one of the biggest ones is Kyle Tucker. So, you know, make of that what you will in the case of the Astros. But, you know, I think the team doesn't need to hang its head in terms of how the season ended up. I don't think that it's any more complicated than what you said. They were just like really very hurt for a lot of the year, key guys. And it's amazing that they were able to persist as long as they did, that they had a good stretch where they were leading the AL West. You know, I don't think that that's anything to be ashamed of. Did the club get set up from the beginning to sort of maximize the season from a talent acquisition perspective, a roster construction perspective? That I think we could be a little more critical. But in terms of the players, like, sure, you know, I don't know. You have guys who could have played better, certainly. But in terms of the end result, I don't know that the Astros getting the season that they were hoping for at a Christian Walker is like enough. You know what I mean? Like, they just had so many guys hurt, and they were probably in a spot where even if they had squeaked in, you know, anything can happen in October. But like, I don't know that they were a club that I would have assumed was capable of a long run. So you know, sometimes these things happen.
The Tigers collapse, that stings more, obviously, but that can still be salvaged because they made the playoffs. So you still have hope. And they can essentially erase the stain of the collapse if they win this week.
Right.
They get to just go play the Guardians again.
Right.
And if they beat the Guardians in the series, then effectively it will be as if they had won the division, and that will just all have been a big nightmare that is now behind them. Yeah, obviously, they would prefer not to have blown the biggest leads ever blown, but
it's really shocking.
Yeah, it is. And if they had, well, when it came down to it in the end, like, you know, when it was neck and neck between them and the Guardians, then I guess ultimately it didn't matter except for the sort of fun fact, unfun fact nature of it. Because either way,
Cleveland
they were
gets
going
to play at home. True,
yes.
Cleveland gets to play at home. And there was a time, and it was not that long ago, when we didn't think we'd have to see Detroit play this week at all, not because they were going to miss the playoffs, but because they were going to be home resting and getting ready for the division series. So, I take your point. I don't want to overstate you feel a little bit bad about it if you're the Tigers.
Sure.
Like, come on now.
but not nearly as bad because you're still in it. Unlike the Astros and the Mets, you're still alive. And you can make everyone forget this. If you win this week, if you continue to win, then it'll just be a blip. It'll just be an asterisk. It'll be a funny story that you laugh about later. If the Tigers win the World Series after blowing the biggest lead ever, that would weirdly be kind of funny / you'd still probably want to have avoided it if you could have. But I'm saying is there's a path to making people mostly forget about this, depending on how they do this week and beyond. And it was actually funny to see how teams handled their starting rotations this weekend and on Sunday specifically, because you can just see that when it comes to a bye, you care. But if it is not a bye that's at stake, if it's just a home field advantage in the wild card round, then you're going to keep your powder dry. You're going to save your ace. Like the Blue Jays on Sunday trying to win the AL East neck and neck with the Yankees, trying to get that bye.
Right. They threw Gausman.
They threw Gausman, who was scheduled to start, and they kept him on turn. Whereas the Tigers, at that point, it just didn't matter that much. I mean, sure, they would have liked to win and have home field advantage in that round, I guess, but they probably correctly calculated it's better to save Tarek Skubal, hold him back so that we can, it's going to be a bigger edge to have Skubal in that series than it is to have home field advantage. And so not that they punted that last game, but they
tried to win that game. They tried to win that game,
They did not maximize their odds of winning Sunday because they were playing the slightly longer game. They were trying to maximize their odds of advancing past the division series. So I'm always interested in quirks like that at the end of the series. And the Red Sox had a similar kind of case because they went into things as like with the potential to be the number 5 seed if they won with a win by them or a Guardians loss, and then the 6th seed if they lost and the Guardians won.
Yeah.
Which would have been the difference between playing the Yankees or the Guardians in the best of 3. And the Guardians' recent run notwithstanding,
you'd rather play the Guardians. I
think you'd rather play the Guardians. Right, yes. So there's a little bit of is this a tanking situation? Do we want to win this game? Do we want to make it look good somehow? How do we even not try exactly? The Red Sox lost on Saturday. They won on Friday and they won on Sunday. So I don't know whether teams really dial it back in that situation. Like once they clinched, obviously you're not going to mess around while there's any potential for you not to make the playoffs. But once that's secure, it comes down to number 5 seed sounds better, but number 6 seeds might actually be better in this case. It's not unique to this season. We see this sort of thing these days, but it's always an interesting thought experiment. Do you actually want to win today?
Yeah, I think most of the time the answer to that is just obviously an unequivocal yes, and it's like but not always. That's the funny thing about it. I've said that you feel like secondhand embarrassment in these moments of embarrassment. The pleasure I got in watching Rafael walk them off. He looked so happy and so relieved, because we've talked about how it's been a rough go. It's been a rough time for him lately, and it comes right down to the wire for him to be the one to do it. It seems pretty good, It seems like a pretty good thing.
Now, as for the Mets, I know that people have been invoking the specter of lol Mets. We have to wait a while. You have to let the pain fade just a little bit. It's never going to go away. But I think out of respect for the Mets fans, I don't know how many Mets fans are listening to this episode, because if I were a Mets fan, I might take a little bit of a sabbatical from baseball. I wouldn't blame anyone after that. But that's about as bad as it gets, really.
Yeah.
Because that's a talented team. That's a team that seemed to have a secure lead in the division at one point and certainly in the wild card race. This is a team with a lot of payroll, with Juan Soto, a team that went for it. Now, on the one hand, you can feel better about the fact that they went for it. They tried to upgrade over the offseason. They tried to upgrade at the deadline. There were teams that could have done a little bit more, and they also ended up barely outside the postseason picture, and you can kind of kick yourself for that too.
Right.
But there's something about, if your team just doesn't do anything, that's frustrating in a different way, more of a sort of throbbing way, but less acute pain. It's just kind of a constant ache more so than it's something that's going to make you scream. But what happened to the Mets here, and it's confounding because, of course, they had injuries too. They were missing, what team isn't really, but it was still the case that they just seemed to be a better team than the team that surpassed them. I mean, congrats to the Reds. Like, they earned it ultimately. But you look at the underlying numbers and the players on the roster and you think, how did the Mets not make it? The Reds made it with 83 wins and the Mets could not manage just being better than that. And plus, there's just the deja vu aspect of it, of the nightmare repeating, which, as people have pointed out, this is the fourth time that the Mets were eliminated from playoff contention on the final day of the regular season in the past 30 years or so, 28 years, I think. And on 3 of those years, they lost the last series to the Marlins. And so when you see the Marlins staring you down this weekend, on paper, that seems like it might be a good thing, even though the Marlins were more respectable this season. To their credit, I guess, now they were actually motivated to be spoilers. Like, they really talked about it. Connor Norby talked about how they wanted to win. They wanted to knock them out. It's a division rival. We want to play spoiler, etc. And they lined up their aces. They lined up their top arms against the Mets. I mean, they went at them with everything they had.
Yeah.
And it was enough. But, man, the Mets just... they squandered it. Like, they just frittered it away, and there's really no sugarcoating it.
I am so fascinated. I don't know that I've worked out my grand unified theory of the Mets just yet. I'm still noodling on these Mets because I do want to lead by saying a very disappointing thing for their fans, and the kind of joke that people historically make about the Mariners. Like, it's a different joke, and obviously it's not as old of a joke because of the relative lengths of the franchises, but it never feels good to be the joke, right? And we can acknowledge the humor in it, but we could wait a day to find it so funny. I don't know. There was a little bit of mean-spiritedness to some, and I'll admit some of that was Phillies fans, and you got your division business to take care of. I was a little sassy. I made a little joke about the Astros, so I understand that instinct, but I don't know what I think of the Mets, because on the one hand, there's the obvious disappointment. You sign a guy to this enormous free agent contract. You have established stars on your roster, but it's not like they were without their issues coming into the season, right? Like, the lineup certainly seemed strong. There's a lot of question in the rotation, either because of injury or because you had guys who were trying to convert from reliever to starter, or because you had really tremendous performances the year before, but in a way that didn't necessarily feel sustainable, right? I think that we can be quick to forget when a team does the sort of miracle run thing and then is fortunate to have a good playoff run. Obviously not a World Series winning one, but one that I think was exciting. They knocked off the Brewers. They do all this stuff. But the Mets last year needed the last day to get in,
Yeah.
And so it wasn't like there weren't exciting parts of the roster. It wasn't like there was no argument to be made about them sustaining last year's gains. But it also wasn't like they were, some impenetrable fortress last year. They had worse performance and they had way worse injury luck. Now, what does that mean for them next year? Well, Alonso's opting out. So they're going to have to deal with that. Although maybe they look around and appreciate some of the roster flexibility that Alonso opting out gives them.
Yeah.
Right.
Maybe.
Because you got a team that's going to be pretty full of DHs pretty fast. You know, this is, at least on the lineup side of things, I sound insane. An old club, you know, or an aging club. Not everybody, but like it's got its guys. It's got its guys who are getting up there in years, and their utility in the field is starting to be a little bit limited. So, you know, are you sad that Alonso's potentially going to leave? Sure, you are. Does it give you a place to put Brandon Nimmo, who's becoming like just unplayable in the outfield? I mean, maybe, right? And then you contrast that with this incredible youth movement in the rotation, and a good farm system. So and you're backstopped by Steve Cohen's money,
right?
Now, I have tried to make the point on this podcast in the past that like, Steve Cohen is like a zip up and hat guy, right? Or a quarter zip and hat guy. He's in it. You know, this is his main job now. That doesn't mean he's not a businessman. This doesn't mean that, you know, if we are to look at his life as a financier, a ruthless businessman. So I think that like the case can be made to Steve Cohen to spend money. And I think that he has in some ways, like a looser definition of like what is necessary spending than some other clubs. And that is, you know, to his credit. But I think the notion that they just have an open checkbook all the time, every year, is probably a little bit misguided. So I don't know what my expectations are for the 2026 Mets on opening day. I don't know that they're that different than they were this year. And I don't know that they were all that different on opening day, except for Soto, which is like a big except.
Yes.
Granted, but like, but still just one guy, right?
Yeah.
Than they were a month before their incredible run last year to get in. So they're in an interesting spot. They do have some guys like they're done with Starling Marte now, presumably.
Yeah,
Jesse Winker's a free agent. They got some money, but not all.
And they have
not a lot.
presumably a full season of the three young guys if they want that, and then prospects like Jet Williams coming up and Carson Bengi, and so I'm more bullish on the Mets than I am, say, the Astros. And that's not just about next year, but also beyond that with the resources that they have and everything. So they got to get to a point where it's not coming down to whether they win or lose on the last day of the season. Like that's not where you want to be. And they had a lot of deadline acquisitions just completely go sideways.
Like Cedric Mullins didn't work out.
Yeah, most of the bullpen guys they acquired.
Yeah, Helsley didn't work very well. Like
good pitchers.
Helsley was a disaster.
Yeah, and that's tough to foresee. And then they had a good offense, but their offense also underperformed. Like sequencing, it was just the worst in terms of clustering hits and making runs out of your production. So. Yeah, look, it's a painful one. It's the most painful collapse for sure. And that's partly the history and the bad memories, but it's not solely that.
And I also think it's worth keeping in mind that, like, when you have a new administration come in, there are parts of team building that do take time. They take time to put in place, and then it takes time for their effects to be felt, like you're not going to see, and that doesn't, I want to preface what I'm about to say by acknowledging that doesn't mean that like starting next year, it's going to be roses, everything roses. And it doesn't mean that even when that stuff is sort of fully baked and in place that you'll see immediate returns from it, right? So like Stearns, in terms of like being able to like really have his hand in, say, how the international side of things is going to be run, that's like a years-long project, right? And not just because I imagine, I don't say this is like super special inside knowledge, but I imagine like every other club in baseball, the Mets are already committed out like 3 years on the international side, even though they shouldn't be. We've seen gains from them. We've seen that they are not just better at, but I think good at pitching development at this point, So I don't mean to say that like the 2026 Mets book your October tickets now, friends. But if I could offer some comfort to Mets fans, I think there's good stuff in this org. I think you have an owner who's committed to the team winning. And I think that you have smart people running it. And then, what they can do with some of the potential roster crunch they have, how they can utilize their farm system. And that means like identifying the guys to keep and the guys that you can use in trade to get other players who can help you more immediately. Like that's an important piece of this. How do you continue to do well in the draft? Some of these are endeavors that progress over a timeline of years, but it's not all bad. And you're right to be annoyed that people are taking the piss out of you so much. It's a lot, it can be a lot. So that's the comfort I offer to Mets fans. And I hope that means that if at some point in the offseason I do like one little joke about them, that you will all forgive me because my heart is in the right place, even though I can't say it in my normal voice. I'm not an imposter. I'm simply sick.
Even though I just said I thought the Mets were a better team than they ultimately showed, if I were the Dodgers watching that race there, I'm not sure that I would have wanted the Reds to win that wild card. Just because even though the Reds on paper, I guess, are the weakest team with the fewest wins, you go into a best of three and you're facing Hunter Green, Nick Lodolo, and Andrew Abbott. I mean, even if the Reds don't have much of an offense right now,
they do not.
Given the respective states of the rotations of the Mets and the Reds at this point, like I think I would probably rather face the Mets in disarray, just like, if they had managed to salvage things and just scrape in. I think I'd feel more confident against them in their rotation than I would going against the Reds right now.
I think especially just because it feels like a more combustible situation with the Mets rotation. And that's not a knock on the talent of the guys. It's just an acknowledgement that they're young, and that they don't have a ton of big league experience. And so, on the one hand, it feels like you have the opportunity for more positive variance, Green accepted, but you also have extreme downside risk there. You're not going to put you're gonna put this version of Jonah Tong out in front of the Dodgers lineup? No, you're not going to do that. They wouldn't do it. It's a 3-game series. The odds that they would do that would be low anyway. But no, that's a bad idea. He's not ready yet. Yeah. I think he's going to be a good pitcher. I think I think he's a promising young arm. But
yeah, it would have been Nolan McLean and pray for rain. That's pretty much it at the end there. Yeah. So
I would feel good about McLean out there. I think that my comfort level with him would be pretty high. And I think you're right. Like Green, it's not that Green hasn't gotten attention this season, but part of this is just he plays for the Reds. I think that the sort of baseline talent level that your average baseball fan has for Hunter Green needs to be adjusted upward and rather dramatically. I'm very excited for Hunter Green, this version of Hunter Green, to get to pitch in the wild card because his season has been very special. I think that he has really evolved as a guy. And it's funny because he's he only threw 107 innings. So it wasn't like he wasn't able to check the durability box. That he wasn't able to do. But in terms of all the other stuff, a very good year, really encouraging. Average fastball velo is up. He's limiting his walks better than he has in the past. He's been homer prone, but he's been able to survive it. It's just, he looks a different guy. His body looks great,
Yep.
So I'm just excited for people to get to mentally recalibrate. I think that for guys on teams like the Reds, October is such an important, I'm not saying anything anyone doesn't already know, but guess what? I'm working with this voice. So here's where we are. It's just such an important opportunity for guys who play in smaller markets to really establish a reputation. I think that happens in October more often than not. And so I'm excited for Hunter Green to get to do that. I hope his start goes well. And not because I am rooting against the Dodgers or anything, just because it's it's good for us to have a broader definition of, or not definition, but a broader understanding of who is meeting the ace definition, and not in a like on his team kind of way, like in a global ace. He's a global ace now. And I think that's pretty cool.
Right. Yeah. I've been trying to think of, well, who's the scariest October team relative to their full season stats or record. And maybe it's the Reds, just because their full season record is pretty unimpressive
so bad,
in what we were just talking about. It is. Yeah.
So bad. It's really not very good.
Then maybe you could consider, well, of course, the Dodgers, given how they pitched in September, that they have their entire rotation.
Dodgers. It's
despite the bullpen problems. But
yeah. I think the answer is the Dodgers, which is a boring answer because it's literally the Dodgers. But I do think it's the Dodgers.
Yeah. There is the Guardians, of course, and their bullpen, which I still have a hard time
I don't understand that.
Trusting the rotation because it was just so lights out in September. But I don't know if that's mostly a mirage or what, but the bullpen you can believe in, or you hope, obviously.
Which is amazing given that they're still without Class A.
Right, I know.
Is he just not going to, he's not going to pitch in October, right? You can't, because I'm sure they can't conclude the investigation now that the postseason has started, and you can't have the potential gambling guy on the field.
Not that October went so well for him last year, but that's still, true. It's just, and obviously as long as the Tigers have Scoopable, then that alone is sort of scary. But no, I guess it's probably the Dodgers, the Reds, maybe the Guardians in there as just, I'd be a little more worried about this team than I would on paper given their full regular season stats. But the Guardians, obviously, neither of these teams from Ohio can hit. And I guess the good thing is, like, people are kind of making fun of or celebrating when the Guardians win without getting hits, like when they had that inning against Scoopable where they didn't get a ball out of the infield, or then the walk-off hit by pitch. And it's like, oh, this is emblematic of the Guardians, but it doesn't feel so much to me like it did last year, let's say, or in 2022 it was, right? When the Guardians had extremely average offenses in both of those. I think dead on average. I think they were 100 WRC plus in both seasons, like 16th in that category. But people were trying to make them into more than they were because they were slappy and scrappy, because they had low strikeout rates or high batting averages or whatever it was. I don't think anyone can realistically talk themselves into this offense being like secretly good, because back then it was like, oh, they're zagging, everyone's zigging, and it's, put the ball in play and all this stuff. And it worked enough for them for a while, but I find it kind of annoying with any team when we have to really like pretend that however they're winning is like the way to win, or that they've unlocked some sort of secret, or everyone's workshopping their like post World Series championship Moneyball-esque book. And it's just like, it's not always some special sauce.
Right.
So sometimes it's like just good enough, and the Guardians offense was just good enough. And I guess technically it was just good enough this year, but it was very bad. It was good enough in that it got them there, but I don't think you can even, because like now they have a super low batting average too.
Right.
And so even if you're like the old school type who's like, ooh, contact and put the ball in play and that postseason, and that's what you want, and which I don't think is the case, but people talk themselves into that. I think this Guardians offense is maybe like, it's immune to people looking at it and saying, they have found the secrets. No, it's like, if they win, it will probably be in spite of the offense. It will be because of the pitching and because they managed to scratch across a few runs. But I don't know that anyone is suggesting that they have some inherent capacity. Well, maybe people are suggesting that they can perfectly time their very few runs for these major moments. But I don't know how you can look at that team and even pretend that, this is the lineup that you want to emulate. They have somehow found the underrated way to win in baseball or something. I don't think so. But it is funny when they manage to just like dink and doink you to death.
I think what the Guardians show you is that what you really want for a good time is like one fully operational and productive Stephen Kwan on your team, but only one, Like, I am a big fan of Stephen Kwan's game when it's going good. And he was a league average hitter this year. I think he had exactly a 100 WRC plus. But we like to have some biodiversity in the game in terms of the profile of guy we see. But the thing about it is that the extreme contact hitter, first of all, if it's not going good, it is unwatchably boring. Mm-hmm. And you don't want too much of it in much the same way that you don't want too much of just bopping. Mm-hmm. You want a mix of guys. And I think that the entertainment value, the ceiling on the entertainment value for a guy with a good but not stellar hit tool and more bop is just higher. Mm-hmm. So I think that's just what you want a full team of is Jose Ramirez's.
Exactly, right. And they have one.
They have one, and that's good, because if they didn't, I doubt that team's in the playoffs.
Oh, absolutely not. Yeah, but he is their only legitimately good hitter, really. Yes. And I don't know that even Guardians fans would argue that point. And no. Unless they win because Jose Ramirez hit a home run or something, then any way that they win will just be the Guardians, they did it again, right. Just snatching victory from the jaws of defeat, because most of their hitters are so bad or mediocre that there's no one there who can put a charge into one, and that's expected. I mean, I know Kwan has been a good hitter in the past and has been okay this year, and Kyle Manzardo's above average, but no, it's a thin group, obviously. Yeah. So unless Ramirez comes up unless he happens to be up in that moment and he delivers, which he often does if he's put in that spot, then it seems they did it. Random Guardians win, and it's not wrong, really, because that's the only way that they can win offensively.
Sam posted about this, and I've been thinking about it since Davey referenced it in his preview of that series earlier today. Sam, as in Sam Miller, posted on Blue Sky, any strike in any situation to Jose Ramirez is a huge mistake. And he posted that on the 27th. So that's Saturday, and he posted it with a screenshot of the Guardians batting order. And it got me thinking, how many on purpose strikes does Jose Ramirez see in this series? You know,
it's the classic, can't let superstar beat you. Yeah, he's the guy.
But when we say that, normally it's not this bad. You know, when we say you can't let that guy beat you, normally Austin Hedges isn't in the lineup. You know, normally you're not oh, what can Gabriel Arias do? No.
Yeah. This time, we really mean it.
We really mean we might really mean it.
Yeah.
Is my voice totally different than I normally perceive it to be? I'm learning about where the pain points of this are. And I'm am I more of an up talker than I thought? I don't want any emails about this. Okay. 0. I will unleash fire upon you. You answer that question.
Okay, delete your drafts if anyone's
delete your drafts.
I do wonder, these teams that ended up just on the outside, if you're in the front office, if you're ownership, how much are you kicking yourself when you know that one win here or there would have made the difference? If you're the Arizona Diamondbacks who ended up coming close. Now, the thing with the NL wildcard race in the end was that it was not like the AL side where you had the Guardians really running the table for a while there. On the NL side, no one was playing particularly well, but the Reds played a little less badly than the Mets and the Diamondbacks at the very end, and that was enough. But if you're the Diamondbacks, a team that came quite close to making it, despite having been, I think, the biggest trade deadline seller non-Minnesota Twins division, how much are you kicking yourself and saying, if only we hadn't made those moves or hadn't made some of those moves? And you never know, of course. You never know if some of the guys that I haven't done the math to see, add up the wars of the guys the Diamondbacks traded away and the guys that were playing in place of them. And of course, you never know whether things would have played out exactly the same way if those players had stayed put. But when the margins are that small, and you took a proactive step to spike your season more or less. Understandably so, given everything that went wrong. I'm not even faulting them. This is purely hindsight. And of course, if you had the foreknowledge to say, well, we're going to miss the playoffs by 1 game or 2 games, and therefore we better not make this move or we better sign that guy. Well, yeah, I think probably if you knew with any certainty that that was the case and it was going to be the difference, then you might make that move. The problem is that we never know that in advance. So I still wonder whether you look back and say, oh, could we have anticipated, would the Astros have kept Kyle Tucker? Would they have done anything, something different? Would the Mets have not made their deadline trade? If they had just not traded for some of those guys, then they might have been in better shape. Of course, you could torture yourself forever with these scenarios, but I especially wonder about it when you made a move to make your team worse in the short term, and you knowingly did that, and you knew that's what you were doing. If you made a move to upgrade and it ended up backfiring, well, that happens, but it's hard to kick yourself over it. But if you sort of declared yourselves out of it and then you got way back in it, or you ended up being so close to it, it's got to smart a little bit, even if you understand that you know more now than you did then.
I think that it always hurts when you miss the playoffs. Yeah. I think is the sort of annoying answer, maybe. I think that if you're a club like Arizona where you had a ton of injuries, to your point, you made very defensible moves. You didn't make any moves that are going to limit you long term, right? Maybe you wish you still had Merrill Kelly, but guess what? He's going to be a free agent at the end of the year. If you want to bring back Merrill Kelly, just go bring back Merrill Kelly, say like, hey, Merrill, you want to come back? Yeah. And then offer him some money. And then he might go, yeah, that sounds good. I bet he didn't actually move,
Yeah, probably not.
I bet he didn't actually move. I bet he's like, great, now I don't have to go buy more boxes. This is always the thing with moving. It's like you buy the boxes and then you got to get the boxes home, you know? And then where do you put them all? You don't want to throw all of them away. You're like, what if I need this box again? But then you're like, but when am I going to move? And then you're like, where do I store them? And you have a garage, but you eventually want to make room for a 10-foot tall skeleton. And then you decide the 10-foot tall skeleton's too big. Can't put it anywhere, Couldn't store it. Too big.
Yeah.
Apparently you break it down. And then I'm like, are people gonna, if aliens come, are they gonna be like, what is this weird race of giant people? We thought that they were all the same size mostly. Because you break it down into its constituent bones, the 10-foot skeletons. If I ever win the lottery, that's how people are gonna know. They're gonna be like, she's got a 10-foot skeleton. That girl hit Powerball. Yeah.
Your whole lawn, just lawn
not
decorations
the whole
for
lawn.
Halloween.
I'm not tacky. Anyway.
Okay. In moderation.
Right, which is 1 in the case of a 10-foot skeleton, I would argue. Anyway, I think that if you're Arizona, you can feel it's a cold comfort because you'd rather be in the playoffs, and you are mindful of the fact that you maybe just wasted, not because of any bad decisions, but because of being, pretty snake bit. You just kind of wasted a good Corbin Carroll and Ketel Marte season and an amazing season from Geraldo Perdomo.
Yep.
And how many of those are you going to get? So you feel bad because it's like time is finite and guys' careers certainly are. And you only get so many bites at the apple and you don't know who's going to come back stronger. And the Dodgers still won the division, but relative to how they were expected to be by most people in this year and how they typically are, they were kind of vulnerable. Maybe you could have done something. But I do think you take comfort from the fact that your process wasn't bad, right? And that's maybe a coward's argument, or maybe an argument that isn't persuasive to people because it sounds like I'm doing weird, trust that process stuff. But I think that when you're going back and you're doing sort of your postmortem on the season, knowing that you correctly identified the guys to move because of, their proximity to free agency, that you got some guys back who might be useful to you, that you didn't harm your chances in 2026, you can just run it back with, the pitching injury stuff to sort out, obviously. I think you'd feel pretty okay within the confines of the disappointment that you would have at a season having ended.
Yeah.
And then you have clubs that are really going through it. Rocco Baldelli doesn't have a job anymore, the Giants fired Bob Melvin. The Mets brought back Mendoza, which I find fascinating. That feels like being rude to your fans. Because
yes. There was a lot of fan frustration. And, usually that might be overblown. But when you're talking about the last day and one game being the difference, then you can point to some managerial miscues and say,
and I thought that he was like very aggressive in that game.
Yeah. Well, you better be at that point with your season on the line. But yeah, it's the managerial news dump the day after the regular season's Carlos Mendoza staying with the Mets, Don Kelly staying with the Pirates, Bob Melvin not staying with the Giants, Rocco Baldelli not staying with the Twins. A few more interim situations or possible retirements or dismissals. Yeah, still twisting in the wind there, but that's not foremost on my mind right now with everything else that's going on. I have been thinking, speaking of those close finishes, everyone's, I think, lamenting the lack of tiebreaker games and how what they took from us. And Monday, we could have had tiebreakers and we could have settled those games on the field the way they were meant to be settled. And generally, I do agree with that. And I lament the loss of the tiebreaker games and the potential for the tiebreaker games. But I keep trying to figure out whether this system is any more or less fair than playing a tiebreaker game. Yeah. Which I guess is not what people are lamenting. They're lamenting that it would be fun to have a game 163. But in terms of like what's more telling, what is more like, is it more satisfying to win this way or decide it this way? Because if you're playing one additional game and that's going to settle everything, it's like you could say that this is more representative of how you played against that team this season. It's taking into account how you did against them all season long and more games than that. And if you wanted to win, then you should have done better in those games. But then again, I guess I always thought of the purpose of having an extra game to settle things was, at least in part, if not largely, just to like have one team win more games on the season than the other team did, not necessarily to win more head-to-head or have a better head-to-head record. Because if you had a tiebreaker game in the past, then it wasn't about whether you won the season series or not. It was about whether you won that game. And so that might seem like, oh, this is small sample. This is silly. What if that team swept you in your previous matchups and then you just happened to win this last one and then that's the one that counts? But to me, it was more about just like having a better record on the season than it was against having a better record against that specific opponent, because it's not as if we really think of head-to-head team records as being predictive or revealing of true talent, right? I mean, maybe people do think that, but I don't think that's true to any great extent. And obviously, like, you're catching teams at different times in the seasons with their rosters in different states and everything. But for me, it was more just about like we had the better record over the full 163 game season than it was about we had a better head-to-head record in that one day. But I don't know. I guess it's sort of subjective the way you think about it. You can defend this current system and the lack of a tiebreaker, not just on the grounds of there's not enough time because we got to squeeze in all these playoff teams and playoff rounds, but also, well, it's sort of representative of how you played all season. So you dug your grave.
Yeah. I think that the tiebreaker scenarios, and I'm open to maybe they need adjustment or something, but I do think the procedure is more representative, to your point, because it takes in so much more than just one game. Yeah. The one game thing is sort of anathema to the whole project of regular season baseball. I mean, it's anathema to the postseason too, which is why, despite not loving the playoff field expanding, I was a fan of the wild card series becoming a thing, even though sometimes it's only 2 games and it's like, is that really more? And it's like, yeah, it's all like 100% more game. It's only 2 because of sweeps. And a lot of them are sweeps, and that becomes sweep. But the game is fun, and the tiebreaker games rather are fun. And you can tell that there is something there that resonates for everybody because of the way that last year on Monday went, where they had to do the doubleheader because of, it had to have been weather, right? I don't even remember now. Did it rain?
Yeah, it was a mess.
And so I think people enjoy it more, but I don't think that it it really necessarily tells you anything. It's very arbitrary. It's like if what you want is to know which is the better team. Well, you just played 162 games.
Yeah.
And if you need more games to figure it out, well, then you need like 50 more, you know,
Right,
you can't just play one. That doesn't tell you much. So
Yeah.
here, maybe I'll just selfishly side with my own interest, which is that even having it come down to the final day is kind of a pain in the ass from a site perspective. So personally, I'm okay with tiebreakers on those grounds, but I acknowledge it can be kind of a letdown.
Yeah, it does switch to like, what would be more entertaining here?
Right.
More so than what would tell us more about
Right.
the true talent of the teams involved. Because if you win the division by one game, that means that you won more games over the course of that season, and that's how we decide things. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you were the true talent better team. Maybe you had a way worse run differential. Maybe you had a bunch of fluky things go your way. Maybe if we could somehow simulate the season a million times, you would not win most of the time. But that was the one we had.
Yeah. So I don't know. And it's as we started, it's not like we didn't have a great final weekend. You know?
That's the other thing. Yeah,
we still managed to have quite a time.
Yeah, I feel sated. I feel full. It's hard for me to complain having been given the gift of this fantastic last week of the regular season that I was not expecting. So could there be more? Could it be better? Sure, I suppose it always could be. But it almost feels like getting greedy to demand tiebreaker games because, you know, for all intents and purposes, we kind of got them. They just were game 61 or 162 or whatever instead of 163. So I have to quibble with a couple comments made by Alex Cora, Red Sox manager. Okay. One big quibble, one minor quibble. So one, he pulled the standard "nobody believed in us" quote at the end of it. And this was particularly, I would say, emphatic version of it. So I'm quoting here from a tweet by Christopher Smith, Red Sox reporter for Mass Live. Here's the quote. "Let's be honest." Love that it starts with "let's be honest." Everything that follows a "let's be honest," you know it's going to be 100% the truth.
Oh, boy.
"Let's be honest. Nobody thought we were going to make it to October, parentheses, when the season started. Whoever says that, yeah, we were a playoff team, that's f***ing bullshit, to be honest with you. Nobody thought we were going to make it to October. It was New York. It was Baltimore. It was Toronto, you know? And we believed we were going to play in October. We set our standards every single day, and we hit our standards." Alex, come on. This is some selective memory here. And I know that every team does this, and sometimes it's more of a managerial tactic. It's more of a motivational trick than it is sincere grievance. Yeah. But come on, we have the receipts here. Nobody thought, and I'm not even saying, oh, technically one person. No, sure, one person predicted every team would probably make it. A lot of people thought the Red Sox were going to. The preseason playoff odds, they were basically a coin flip to me. They were 55% in the preseason playoff odds.
They had the fourth highest odds in the American League, and they were only a half a percentage point behind the Twins. Ooh.
Yeah, and he must have missed or forgotten the FanGraphs preseason staff predictions because the FanGraphs staff was higher on the Red Sox than any other AL team.
Yeah.
They were
we were pretty horny for the Red Sox. It's true. Yeah.
It was like by a lot.
Yeah, when I put that post together, I was like, oh God, this could look real. We could look real dumb at the end of this.
Well, I guess not, because
I guess
they
not.
Squeaked in, and also I guess that was completely forgotten. You'd think that he would have said, except the FanGraphs staff, they really believed in us. They had faith when nobody else did.
Every other day at home. Like, what are you talking about, man? Have some respect.
12 FanGraphs contributors picked the Red Sox as the top seed in the AL, and no other AL team had more than 5 picks. I mean,
I think that they were maybe the most popular. Well, no, I guess the Dodgers were probably the most popular World Series team, right?
Yeah, I'll have to check on that.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. But we believed in you. We believed in you, Alex.
A lot of people believed in the Red Sox. They had many more people pick them to win the AL East. And this is just one site. Obviously, I have not done a survey, but It was, maybe the FanGraphs staff was more optimistic than most, but it wasn't like people were scoffing and said, "What are the Red Sox, an October team?" There was a lot of optimism about the Red Sox. Like they traded for Gregor Crochet. They signed Alex Bregman. They still had Rafael Devers.
Yeah,
they had all the young guys coming up. All these rookies on the cusp of the majors. Baseball. Yeah, like there was a lot of optimism about the Red Sox. They weren't a lock or anything, but what are you talking about? So
what are you talking about?
It's hard for me to tell whether he's just trying to bolster an us against the world mentality here. And, they're beat up and they're missing some players too. And whatever you have to say to get your players fired up, fine. But man, if he sincerely believes this, like that's some serious selective memory, or like, I know how it is that it's like it hurts to lose more than it's good to win usually. Like it makes you feel worse to lose than it makes you feel good to win in many cases. Yeah. We had something along those lines, and the only rule is it has to work. And many people have said that, and probably applies to the NL wildcard race too. Like Mets fans probably feel worse than Reds fans feel good. Reds fans, I'm sure they feel very good, to be clear. But probably, like, given the expectations for that team and where they seem to be for much of the season and the fact that they had 83 wins, if they had missed out, it would have been disappointing, but it wouldn't have been probably how Mets fans are feeling right now. And I'm not just saying because there are more Mets fans than there are Reds fans. It hurts a lot to lose, and especially to lose in that manner. And that's similar if you're someone who, say, is a public figure in any way and puts work out there and writes and podcasts and everything. You'll remember the barbs maybe more quickly than you'll remember the compliments. You'll remember some nasty thing someone said to you one time, and it's, the outlier, but it sticks in your craw. Maybe that is what's happening here with Alex Cora. I don't know. Maybe he read some site's predictions or something and they were low on the Red Sox and he just generalized to nobody believed in us. But I assure you, plenty of people believed in the Boston Red Sox.
Yeah. And look, I know that this is the first time in a minute that they've been back. Mm-hmm. And so maybe if we're being charitable, maybe what he means is to reference sort of a number of years of futility on that score. And not every, who knows when he engaged, if he did at all, with, the various sites, playoff odds for them. We don't know.
I don't know. But he's making it sound as if he sampled. He's not like, I don't know if anybody believed in us. I didn't check. He's nobody believed. And if he's talking about prior seasons when nobody believed in them and they in fact did not deserve to be believed in because they didn't make the playoffs, then
they didn't make the playoffs.
Nobody believed in us and they were right. Kudos to them.
They're low. Can I do this fast enough? So they bottomed out from a playoff odds perspective for us, I think, around June 6th. They were at 12.5% odds of making the postseason. And that's their total odds, right? So that's going to include their odds of squeaking in on a wild card and also their odds of winning the division. And at that juncture on that day, so including that day's games, they were 30-35. They were 10.5 out. Mm-hmm. New York was 39-23. So, like, I don't know, Alex, you were playing bad baseball then, man. Mm-hmm. And who knows? Again, we don't know when he engaged with any of this stuff or if he did.
Yeah, this quote does have the when the season started, but it's in parentheses. So I guess to be charitable, maybe the reporter who tweeted this was inferring that that's what he meant. And maybe he meant like later in the year when they were scuffling or something. But it certainly sounds as if he was saying at the start of the season. I would like to just someone who misses the playoffs just to say, like, you know what? Yeah, you called it. Like, I thought we were going to make it, and everyone said they didn't believe in us. It's like
they were right.
Yeah, the Twitter meme, like the haters said I couldn't do it, and they were correct. Honestly, great call from the haters.
Great call from the haters.
I'd like to have someone say that for once.
I also think that, like, I wish that we would sort of change the way that we enter into these moments. And the we here needs to be specified, because obviously the way that Alex Cora or any member of the Red Sox, either a player or just like an employee of the team, the way that they're going to engage with this stuff is just fundamentally different than the way that I am, the way that you are, the way that their fans are even, right? The stakes for us are disappointment or annoyance or being wrong. You know, the stakes for them are losing their jobs. You know, again, we just saw some managers get fired. So I want to acknowledge that this isn't actually a cohesive we that I'm about to make reference to. But, you know, very often what happens when a team goes from having really crummy playoff odds to making the postseason is something really spectacular, you know? And sometimes it's the guys around you doing a bad job. The Reds aren't in the playoffs if the Mets don't have their collapse, right? Mm-hmm. But in the case where a team goes on a big heater, you know, where a prospect comes up and sort of changes the trajectory of a season, reinforces a position of weakness, what have you. Even when that happens, we tend to get this reaction either from fans or from, well, I won't say teams, the social media accounts of teams who are playing their own little game. Mm-hmm. And it's one of frustration. It's one of like bulletin board material. No one believed in us. And I've said this before, like I want our playoff odds to be grounded in in a sound method, the way that I want all of our stats to be rigorous and, you know, viable. But sometimes the odds are wrong because a guy gets badly injured. Sometimes they're wrong because you got like a bunch of young guys and they perform better than the projections thought they would because they're young, and projections are inherently conservative about young guys, and they're young, so they stayed healthier. And I wish that we could lean into the wonderment part of that a little bit more. And some of that is self-interested because I don't love to see the screenshots that are like, FanGraphs doesn't know what we're talking about. And I was like, I don't know, man. The team was 30-35. Mm-hmm. And the Yankees looked like they'd never lose again. And Aaron Judge looked like he was going to hit 400 and also hit 50 home runs. Like, what do you want from me? Mm-hmm. But I also will acknowledge that, like, it's such a long season. We all keep trying to make it longer by bringing back the tiebreaker. Mm-hmm. And I think that motivating yourself day in and day out is really challenging. But yeah, with the benefit of like, and maybe his answer and his speech would have been different if he had delivered it. Were those remarks post-game yesterday or were they this morning?
That was from September 27th, the afternoon. Yeah.
So that was the day they clinched.
Yeah, that was Saturday.
Okay. So like, you know, I also wonder if it's just like, I want to grant him the grace of being like, hey, if you'd had 24 hours, would there have been an F-bomb in there? You know what I mean? Like, you're in the big feeling of the mm-hmm. moment. It's like Richard Sherman giving mm-hmm. Michael Crabtree the business right after the NFC Championship game. It's like, I don't know, he just made the biggest play of his entire career to send his team to the Super Bowl. He's mm-hmm. probably going to be emotional. Maybe give him a cooling off period. Yeah. That's a football reference, Ben. That's about football. But you have to know about that. What do you think about the 40-40 tie? Did you watch that?
I talked about it on a podcast earlier today.
I love how you didn't answer the initial question.
I related it to baseball. And I asked, why can't we have nice things like ties?
Oh, my God. Wow. I mean, that's what I get. I was here to give you a little bit of the business and you turned it around with a terrible take. A 40-40 tie is so funny. I got up this morning and I made coffee and then I sat down at my computer to start working and I was like halfway through the cup of coffee and I remembered that game ended in a 40-40 tie. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know if I need more coffee. That was quite the jolt back to reality. That's hilarious.
Yeah, 40-40 your voice tie. Is gaining strength just thinking about it. It sounds like you're getting stronger as the episode goes on. The other thing that this was silly, but I think illuminating. So this was a Cora quote from David Laurela's Sunday Notes at FanGraphs this past weekend, which was largely about Carlos Narvaez and how he has exceeded expectations. Carlos Narvaez, not quoted in here saying, nobody believed in me, but so he's talking to Cora and he got quotes about how he kind of has a Gleyber Torres Narvaez-esque swing, because this was, I guess, a comp that had come up in the spring. And so Lorela asked Cora if Narvaez still has a Gleyber Torres-like swing. And the quote is, "Not this year's Gleyber," Cora replied. "Now Gleyber pulls the ball. But with Narvi, he's able to stay inside pitches and shoot it the other way." So I thought this was interesting because I was thinking, oh, Gleyber pulls the ball now? Did I miss like a Gleyber Torres swing reinvention or something? Because as far as I knew, his numbers were not dramatically different from how they had been before, surface stats wise. Like he started pretty well this season and then ended up being, fine, Gleyber-ish, like everyone on the Tigers. He was worse later on, but good enough, worth the signing and everything. But I'm thinking, well, did I miss, and then I look at his stats and it's not like he suddenly hit for more power or anything. It was very Gleyber-esque. And then I look at his pull rate, his pull percentage. He has the lowest pull percentage of his career, according to FanGraphs, batted ball stats, according to StatCast, however you slice it, balls in the air, all balls, whatever it is. So Cora confidently claiming that this year's Gleyber is different from previous Gleyber because now Gleyber pulls the ball. And I checked, I asked Lorela when he got this quote. He said it was a couple of weeks ago, like maybe mid-September. And so I speculated, and Lorela thought that I was probably right, that what happened here was that the Red Sox played the Tigers for a 3-game series back in mid-May.
Oh.
And I hypothesized, I bet that Gleyber has pulled the ball in games against the Red Sox this season. And I was even thinking like maybe Lorela got the quote this weekend and Gleyber had just, because the Red Sox were playing the Tigers. But no, it predated this weekend series. And so there was only one previous Red Sox-Tigers series, and it was in May. And sure enough, in those 3 games, Gleyber Torres pulled 60% of his batted balls, which is like double his rate on the season. And the first game that Gleyber played against Boston in that series and on the season, he had 3 hits and 2 of them were pulled, including 1 home run that he pulled. And so what I suspect happened here is that Alex Cora imprinted on that one game of Gleyber, or maybe that one. And then he essentially just hallucinated it like a Google AI overview or something and just extrapolated and assumed that that was representative of the season as a whole. And I bet that so many managers and players and coaches
100%
all think like this, because, I mean, look, they're busy, maybe they're not checking the rest of the league's stats. I think this is probably why for years when you did have coaches or players or manager, when you've had them vote, vote on awards or gold gloves or all-star selections or whatever it is, in many cases, they don't seem to represent what the stats would say. And I think that's because they are literally just generalizing from the handful of games that they happen to see. And that's right. I guess it's not surprising, but it's also sort of wild to me because, like, Cora just very confidently proclaimed that Gleyber Torres was a different guy this year based on seeing him in 3 games like 5 months ago, And like, he knows a lot about baseball. He played. He's managed for a long time. He must be aware that just sitting on a single series and getting an abbreviated look at a guy is not necessarily going to be telling. You're not going to be able to, you might just get him in a good series or a weird series or a bad series or whatever. And yet he wasn't like, well, I think Gleyber might be different, or, when he played us this year, he seemed to pull the ball more. I haven't checked the stats, but maybe no. It was just, this is who he was in that 3 games 5 months ago. Therefore, that's just who he is. It's like that was just fixed, some sort of object permanence thing. Like that was Gleyber forever because of who he is. And I don't know, maybe later when he was prepping for the series this weekend with actual stakes, maybe he looked at the scouting report and was like, oh, I was wrong about that. Actually, Gleyber's not pulling the ball more. But there's got to be so much thinking like that goes on. And it's not just exclusive to baseball. I mean, we all do this in life. Like, you have to guard against it all the time. Yeah. But I think I would, like, I try to be aware of what I don't know. And if I've just
Yeah.
seen like, a small smattering of plate appearances on a season, I might playfully think like, oh yeah, that guy, he never seems to make an out when I'm watching, or I never see him do anything good. But I'm not going to then make the leap from that to actually he sucks. Like, oh, let's see what he did the rest of the time, which is probably the much larger sample. So I guess that's why I'm saying this is why we need like scouting reports and projections and data, as opposed to the ultimate anecdata, which is what this was. It's a low stakes observation, but nonetheless, I'm sure that people have thought that way forever, and that in many cases they were under a misapprehension.
Yeah, you get guys who are like your very special particle.
Mm-hmm.
And it behaves differently when you're watching it versus other people. Like, for a long time for me, this was Ryan Presley, because, and not like this year's version of what Ryan Presley, who had like an ERA above 4, but like the past versions of Ryan Presley, like closer for the Astros, Ryan Presley. And it just felt like every time I watched him, he sucked. And I knew that wasn't true.
Yeah.
I knew he didn't actually suck because he was like a 2.5 win reliever in 2021. I was like, he's a good player. He's a good pitcher.
Yeah.
But that year I just felt like, I don't know, he was my very special particle. Like, he blew 2 saves that entire season, and I felt like I watched both of them live. And so then I was like, well, he's not very good actually. And I was like, I know that's not true, but it did inform.
Right.
Gave me confidence against him for batters that was completely unearned, because he was really good.
Yep.
He was my very special particle. But that's funny.
Well, by the time people hear this, it will be the day of the first games, and look,
I will have no voice left at all.
Yeah, here some of the teams that we're going to be seeing, we're going to be talking about them for the next month, and we're going to run out of things to say and observations to make about these rosters and their strengths and weaknesses. And there are plenty of places you can find that complete rundown of what's this team's strength and what's this team's weakness and all that. We get into more series previewy stuff when we actually get to full series, but I'll just toss out a few things that I'm generally excited about for this postseason.
Yeah, do it.
Now I'm very psyched for the series this week. Series. Yeah,
just series.
I know, but that could have referred to a single series.
I know.
It's a problem, but
and one of those ones that isn't better written as opposed to spoken.
Yeah. So I'm really, I think, particularly excited for the AL wildcard matchups here. Now, on the one hand, it feels like, the Guardians are probably thinking, we did it. We pulled off this incredible comeback. And here we go again.
Yeah.
Like, this could all be undone so quickly. Yeah. And so, in a way, we just basically saw a playoff series between the Tigers and the Guardians last week, and we were aware of the stakes at the time. And so it almost feels too soon, and yet I think I'm ready for more. I just like that the AL wildcard matchups are just intra-divisional matchups between teams with long-standing history / rivalry, or just and/or very recent, just head-to-head matchups that meant the world. So I'm very excited to see if the Tigers can essentially erase the stain of the collapse that just befell them, or if the Guardians can really rub it in and complete the job. It feels like the job is not quite done. They've got to completely exterminate the Tigers now. And on the other side, we get Red Sox Yankees, and look, Red Sox Yankees, it's always fun, it's always heated, but the rivalry, even though just the institutional memory of it persists, it's been in a bit of a slump, I would say, lately, just because those two teams have, for the most part, it hasn't been a peak period for those two teams being in direct competition and like costing each other a playoff spot or meeting up in the postseason. There have been times in their history where they met up more commonly, or it was like, they were finishing first and second in the division, and, they really had some stakes, not just historical stakes, but present stakes. And so kind of happy to have it back. I mean, the Yankees and Red Sox haters out there, I guess, are happy to see that one of them will lose, maybe, but otherwise not super psyched for that matchup. But look, I have enough residual memories and emotional stakes tied to Yankees-Red Sox series that it's good to have that juice back at this stage. So we're going right into the thick of it. Wild card series starts, and we've got some A matchups on that side. And, I just talked about the Reds and how they are sort of scary, and they could very well wipe the Dodgers out just like that.
Yeah.
And that ties into the other thing that we've talked about and people have written about and I've written about, just the fact that this is a morass of mediocrity, and it doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter that these teams were mid for much of the season.
Right.
Now, if anything, that only enhances the competition, the sense that anything can happen. Realistically, I guess it's not really that much more random than any other year, but it's a tad more random. And the fact that your separation now is what, 14 wins between the lowest win total and highest win total. And it's not even like, there's some team that you think of as a super team that just got jobbed or something. It's just not great teams, really. Yeah. And so I, again, hope that will ward off some of the worst of the baseball is broken, because you can play a whole season and have a better year and then immediately get knocked out, which I'm sympathetic to. Like, it's certainly true to some extent, but also we're stuck with it. So I'm kind of tired of the refrain, because, there's only so much we can do at this stage, or it doesn't seem like we're going to really roll things back. So I hope that we'll be spared. Now, if the Reds beat the Dodgers, then Dodgers fans will be upset about that. Sure. No one else will, obviously, but I think, that will speak to, things are random, but also, hey, I guess Dodgers, maybe you should have been a bit better. So then you could have gotten a bye and not had to play in the wild card round. So I think these are good matchups, and I'm content with the playoff field as a whole, and the fact that we have more evenly matched teams than is typically the case.
I think that my guess is that it will make for more compelling viewing. And I also have to allow for the possibility that we'll just get a bunch of duds.
Yep.
And, teams don't always behave or play the way we expect them to. Sort of like how your voice can change a lot, which is one cold. But I feel like every team in the playoff field does at least one thing very well and has obvious weaknesses. Mm-hmm. And that can make for really compelling baseball, right? And interesting strategy. How do you exploit those weaknesses? How do you bolster your strengths? Mm-hmm. So that part is good. I know that I said that I feel bad for Mets fans, and my feeling is sincere. I think it is good for us to have had one of the Mets and Dodgers make the postseason and the other not. And that the one that didn't do it with like 115 wins. Mm-hmm. I want teams to be rewarded for spending money. I want very desperately to not have the same discourse about spending that we had last offseason around the Dodgers. But for the Dodgers spending, we could have had the same conversation about the Mets, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that a reminder to everyone that, like, you can't buy the thing on the first day or any of the days that precede it. You still have to play 162 is valuable. Mm-hmm. And then having a team that did spend a lot make it is also valuable. So I appreciate that part of it. It's not going to stop those who want a cap from arguing for one. But they're going to sound sillier when they do it. Mm-hmm. That's always nice. And it's good that we have a little shakeup in terms of who's there. Like we said, we don't have the Astros. The Red Sox are not without an august October history, but, they've been out of it for a couple of years. The Reds sneak in on a squeaker. Mm-hmm. I'm comfortable saying that I am less enthused by this year's AL Central participation than I was last year. Last year, it was like, oh, yeah, like the Royals are fun and young and cool and Bobby Wood Jr. and da-da-da. And they had this pitching plan and it worked, and that's great. And you had pitching chaos, cool. Mm-hmm. And you had Cleveland, And now I'm like, I wonder if this is a little too much AL Central.
Yeah, for this week, I think it's a highlight for me, just because of how they got there. But when one of them advances, then
and if it's to your earlier point, if it's Detroit that advances, I think then a lot of the consternation there falls away, because they are, they haven't played well lately, but I think they are a good team, and they are a better team certainly than Cleveland. So
I would like the redemption arc, the get off to a hot start, completely collapse historically, and then can they make good? I would be pretty into that. And yeah, also I think really one of my number one storylines here is that the four teams with the longest World Series droughts or the longest streaks of seasons without a championship are in these playoffs. So a third of, and I'm counting, of course, the three who have never won one, namely the Mariners, the Padres, the Brewers. Mariners haven't won a pennant. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. And then, of course, the Guardians, who have not won since 1948. So their drought extends decades longer than those three teams I just mentioned. So for all intents and purposes, sure, they have won World Series in the past. But for anyone who's alive right now, they've potentially been waiting longer, suffering more in some respects. So the fact that we have four teams, a third of the field, is composed of these teams that have never won one or haven't won one for the longest time. That's pretty exciting because you do have a potential for these teams to meet, obviously. Yeah. You could get Mariners versus Padres or Brewers. How much fun would that be? Guaranteed franchise first-time champion. That would be fantastic.
Plus, we'd be if we had Brewers Mariners, we'd be guaranteed a FanGraphs World Series ring.
Yeah, I guess that's true. But
it's true.
We haven't had a series like that where both participants had no titles coming into since 1980. When
I wasn't even alive yet. That's how long ago it was.
The Phillies played the Royals, and someone was guaranteed to win their first, and the Phillies finally did. And, you know, there have been some others since then with like teams that hadn't won in the city that they were located in, that kind of thing. But franchise all time, it's been 45 years since that happened. So I'm pretty excited about that, though I have to ask for your perspective on this. So say that happens. Say you get Mariners or Guardians versus Brewers or Padres. Would it be more painful to lose that way when you look across the field and the team that wins is very much feeling what you would have been feeling because they have sort of the same history and baggage? Like, would that hurt you more? Let's say, I don't even want to put this on the Mariners. So let's
you can put it on the Mariners.
Okay, all right. Let's say the Mariners make the World Series. At least, hey, we won a pennant for the first time. That's something.
Yeah, very exciting.
But say you lose to the Brewers or the Padres, and you see the Brewers and the Padres over there celebrating. Granted, I guess they've been around slightly longer than the Mariners have, but nonetheless, you could so easily envision, that could be us having our first. Is that more painful because you came so close, or would it be less painful because you're like, you know what, if we have to suffer, at least a team that's sort of in the same boat, their fans get the relief that we crave, and someday it will be our turn and we can be kind of philosophical about it because like a wrong has been righted. It wasn't the greatest wrong that my team has never won. But like, is there sympathy among the fans of teams? Do you feel an affinity for Brewers fans, for Padres fans? Because you've all been waiting collectively for so long, and would that ease the pain or would that accentuate it?
I think it would ease the pain. Part of it is that I just like those teams, man. I like that Brewers team.
Yes, me
I
too.
like that Padres team.
Me too.
They have fun players. I've enjoyed watching them play all season. You know, it's so funny. Maybe part of the problem is just the specificity of it. I think that in terms of teams that I personally maybe don't like a lot, I don't really have a great amount of animus for any of the clubs on the NL side. Mm-hmm. I guess I find some of the approach to like building the team on the part of the Cubs to be somewhat confounding. And they have, it's like if them winning in 16 open one hell portal, what does them winning again do? So we do have some like cosmic questions we maybe have to answer there. But I don't know. I'm like most of the teams in the playoff field this year, even ones that I'm like, I don't know that I have a great need to see a Dodgers back to back, not because I have any animus toward the Dodgers, but just because it's like, we'll let somebody else do it.
Sure.
But there's enough distance between, I like all these clubs. I don't know. I think that the way that the NL field is currently constituted, there isn't really a team that would make me go like, oh, I feel even worse now.
Yeah.
I do think that if Cleveland wins and knocks Seattle out in the division series before it can advance, like that sort of brings back some painful memories, but it's not even a totally flush comp, So I don't know, man. I think it's a good group. I'm pretty happy with it in general.
I think so too. Yeah, even some of the perennial playoff teams like the Phillies, they've been back a few, but they keep winning more games every regular season.
Right.
And this is a fun group of guys. And so I don't begrudge them making it back. Like we haven't seen
really good.
Yeah, we haven't seen these Phillies win one. They've gotten close, but I'm not sick of seeing them on this stage.
Another
sure.
FanGraphs World Series ring. Maybe that's really what I'm rooting for more
Sounds
than
like
anything.
it.
I just want the site to get a ring by proxy.
Yeah. Well, the Mariners win, you get both. So that's the best case scenario. But
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yes.
So really we should do, that's just what we should do, I think. you know?
Yeah, I'm obviously excited to see Shohei make his first MLB postseason start on the mound and how the Dodgers navigate their bullpen and rotation. And another thing, I was planning to write an article on what seemed to be probably a record number of first-year playoff starters. And by that, I mean like postseason starters who are in their first year in the majors, not their first trip to the postseason. Because this was actually a good year for old pitchers just in general. Like it was the most WAR and innings pitched by 35 plus pitchers in quite a few years. But there were also quite a few young guys who we talked about that came up during the stretch run and were playing important parts, really load bearing, to use your terminology, pitchers on staffs being promoted. And that article got sort of scuttled because the Mets collapsed. And then also the Miz is in the bullpen, it seems like. And Cade Horton is hurt and unavailable for at least through the division series. So that's a blow. But even so, the record in non-2020 years, there were, Michael Mountain, Patreon supporter, determined this for me, that there were 7 distinct first-year starters in the 2020 playoffs with 16 teams, but in other years it's 5. The record is only 5 first-year starters, and that was in 2013. And that's in play, potentially. A lot of things would have to go right. But, you have like Connolly Early with the Red Sox. You have Parker Messick with the Guardians. You have Cam Schlittler for the Yankees. You
weren't confident.
No, I wasn't. I hesitated a bit, but I think I made it. I
think you did okay.
Trey Savage for the Blue Jays. You have Chad Patrick for the Brewers, and you perhaps have Horton for the Cubs. Yeah. And all of these guys have been between the best and third best starters on their staffs by FanGraphs WAR and RA9 WAR since the day they debuted. So like these guys have played important parts for their rotation, and some of them at least are going to be thrown into the fire. And that's pretty exciting. It's like Trey Savage just showed up, but he was he was the most effective Blue Jay starter in his 3 starts he made. So then you have to navigate, okay, are we going to just go for it and roll him right out there and maybe you take a chance and, short leash or whatever. So I'm excited to see what those guys do. But I'm just generally excited. We kind of got like our appetites were whetted by all of the madness of the last week. And now it's the main event. Here we go.
Here we go.
All right, a few follow-ups and book closings on various statistical quirks we were tracking. We talked last week about how the Cardinals and Giants effectively eliminated each other in consecutive games. Listener David writes, I'm sure you have already received a ton of emails about the 1982 season in which the Giants were eliminated by the Dodgers in the second to last game of the season, and the next day, the Giants eliminated the Dodgers in the last game of the season. Actually, we did not receive a ton of emails about that, but we did receive this one, and David says, I was at the game in which the Giants were eliminated, and as an 11-year-old Giants fan, it introduced me to baseball heartbreak. Rough. Guess you got to learn at some point. We talked about the Nationals hiring Paul Taboni as their head of baseball operations, former Red Sox assistant GM. And when we talked about that, we didn't yet have his job title, so we just knew that he was the head of baseball operations. And we joked about how Tobo was a hobo and would maybe one day be a pobo. Well, that day has already come. The Nationals named him president of baseball operations. So he just skipped straight past GM. Are you supposed to be able to do that? It's like the go directly to jail, do not pass go, do not collect $200, do not pass Pobo. I guess he didn't pass Pobo. He bypassed GM on the way to Pobo and collected, presumably, much more than $200. How often has this happened, though? How often has someone gone from assistant GM straight to Pobo? Craig Breslow came to mind, Paul Taboni's former boss. He went from assistant GM of the Cubs straight to chief baseball officer, the Boston equivalent of Pobo. So maybe this will become more common because of this title inflation that's happening. Just demand immediate Pobo status if you're running a baseball operations department. Maybe people won't want to be GM at all. The GM will just be the Pobo, and the person who would have been the AGM will be the GM. Or I guess it could be something where you have to offer multiple title bumps to get someone to come if they're happy where they are, or they're entering maybe a dysfunctional front office. Not that the Red Sox front office has been free of dysfunction, but if you're wary of entering the Nationals situation where it's unclear how much initiative you can take or who your bosses are or what the investment will be, and you're a hot shot front office prospect, you say, yeah, you can have me, but you got to make me Pobo on day one. But then I wonder, what will the next step be? If Pobo is the new GM, there's got to be a new Pobo. Stay tuned. Okay, what else? Luis Arraez ended up at a 3.1% strikeout rate, which, while extraordinary, was slightly less extraordinary than it was the last time we talked about it. So he ended up with a 14K percentage plus. That's his strikeout rate relative to the league index stat. That is the lowest since Nellie Fox in 1961 and 62. But Joe Sewell can eternally rest easy because Arraez did not reach single digits. Nor did he reach a 300 batting average. Only Trey Turner did among qualified National League hitters. Speaking of low batting averages, Jake Berger did not hit 250. So much for the quarter pounder. He batted 236. James Wood finished 2 strikeouts short of Mark Reynolds' single season record, 221 to 223. So Reynolds reigns supreme. Willie Adames hit 30 home runs for the San Francisco Giants. So one improbably long post-Bonds drought is over. The Giants streak without a 30 home run hitter. Willie Adames snapped it. Now the other improbably long post-Bonds drought is also in line to be broken. That's the one where there's been a different opening day left fielder in every season since Bonds. But there is some potential for there to be a repeat next year. Elliot Ramos started opening day in left field this season, and he may well do it again. We ended up with 3 200-plus inning pitchers. Tarek Skubal did not join the group because he didn't pitch on Sunday, but Christopher Sanchez did clear that bar at 202 innings, so 3. Webb, Crochet, and Sanchez, and Webb tops the list at a measly 207 innings. And while we're talking innings eaters, Patrick Corbin did not lead the Texas Rangers in innings pitched. He finished second, about 17 innings behind Jacob deGrom. Finally, it's time to eat crow. You may remember that back in mid-July, episode 2350, I began the pod with a prediction, which I rarely do, but the Pirates and Royals had recently swapped Adam Frazier and Cam Devaney, and there couldn't have been a lower stakes, lower profile trade, but for some reason I seized on this, and I thought, I don't get it. Cam Devaney seems to me to be just as good as Adam Frazier right now, and he's the younger team-controlled guy. Why not just promote Cam Devaney if you're the Royals instead of acquiring Adam Frazier? Well, the Royals were right, and I was wrong. Very wrong, at least going by the results, and what else can we go by? Frazier played perfectly well for the Royals. 56 games, 197 plate appearances, multiple positions, 98 WRC+, .6 WAR. What more could you expect or ask of Adam Frazier? Meanwhile, Cam Devaney was not promoted by the Pirates for quite some time. He was in AAA for them. But when they did ultimately promote him, he did not make a case that they should have brought him up earlier. 14 games, 38 plate appearances, -5 WRC+, negative .4 WAR. So not only did Cam Devaney not out-hit or out-WAR Adam Frazier, Frazier was a full win-above replacement better. I am chastened. The Royals were right. I was wrong. This has taught me, or reminded me, that making predictions about baseball is a fool's game. I will not predict that anyone will support us on Patreon after hearing our plea at the start of this episode, but if you should choose to, we would be grateful. You can do it by going to patreon.com/effectivelywild and signing up to pledge some monthly or yearly amount to help keep the podcast going, help us stay ad-free, and get yourself access to some perks, as have the following 5 listeners: Kara Kaufman, Tom Valenzola, Andrew Guthrie, Jason Weiger, and Adil Wali. Thanks to all of you. Patreon perks include access to the Effectively Wild Discord group for patrons only, monthly bonus episodes. We just published the 47th of them this weekend, and you can sign up and access them all immediately. The aforementioned playoff live streams coming soon to the Discord group near you. Sign up at the Ned Garver tier or above to partake. Plus, personalized messages, prioritized email answers, discounts on merch, and so much more. Check out all the offerings at patreon.com/effectivelywild. If you are a Patreon supporter, you can message us through the Patreon site. If not, you can contact us via email, send your questions, comments, intro and outro themes to podcast@fangraphs.com. You can rate, review, and subscribe to Effectively Wild on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, and other podcast platforms. You can join our Facebook group at facebook.com/group/effectivelywild. You can find the Effectively Wild subreddit at r/effectivelywild. And you can check the show notes at FanGraphs or the episode description in your podcast app for links to the stories and stats we cited today. Thanks to Shane McKeon for his editing and production assistance. We survived another regular season. We're about to embark on another postseason. We hope you'll join us for the ride, and we will be back with another episode soon.
The wacky hypotheticals are perfectively styled, and their stat blast queries are detectively compiled. They're nonagerian baseball legends selectively dialed, but their spiciest takes are still respectfully mild. More than 2,000 episodes retrospectively filed, and at each new one we still collectively smile. That's effectively wild. That's effectively wild.